Have you ever stopped and wondered why you keep finding yourself in the same kinds of relationships? Different person, different face, different beginning, but somehow the same ending, the same arguments, the same disappointment, the same feeling of not being understood, not being chosen, or basically not feeling any sort of emotional safety. But that isn't a coincidence. It's often because you're living from a blueprint you didn't even know that you had. And until you understand where that blueprint came from, you're going to continue repeating patterns you never consciously chose. I'm Jenn Pinkerton, and I'm a psychotherapist and a connection expert. I help people stop repeating the same painful relationship patterns and start instead building healthier, more connected relationships where they can truly thrive. People often ask me why intelligent, successful, self-aware people continue finding themselves in the same type of unhealthy relational dynamic, or they're just repeating the same conflicts over and over again. They'll say things to me like, I don't understand why this keeps happening, or why do I keep choosing people who aren't emotionally available to me? Why do I always end up feeling alone in my relationships? Why do I keep reacting this way when I absolutely know better? But the answer is often much deeper than communication or compatibility or even the person you're dating. Long before you ever even went on your first date, long before you fell in love, long before you learned how to communicate with a partner, you were already learning what love looked like. So today I want to introduce you to a concept that I call love lessons. Because whether those lessons were healthy or unhealthy, they quietly became the blueprint that your brain, your nervous system, and your heart have been using ever since. So I remember working with a client recently who looked at me and they said something that I've heard really maybe hundreds of times over the years, but Jenn, I don't understand why I keep ending up here. And this client, she had read all the books. She had listened to podcasts. She had gone to therapy before she came to me. She knew what healthy relationship looked like intellectually, yet somehow she kept ending up emotionally unavailable partners every time. She would feel really anxious. She kept overthinking about it. She kept working harder to earn love, to prove her worth. And at one point she looked at me and said, I feel like I've been dating this same person in different bodies. And that statement has stayed with me for years because she wasn't choosing the same person, obviously, but she was following the same blueprint. And that blueprint wasn't created when she started dating. It was created decades earlier. As a little girl, watching, listening, feeling, learning, and without even realizing it. And it's the same thing true for all of us. So nobody teaches us how to love by sitting us down and giving us a lesson. We learn love by living it. We learn love by watching the people who raised us. We learn by experiencing how conflict was handled, how affection was expressed, how emotions were responded to in the moment, and whether feelings were welcomed or dismissed or minimized, whether mistakes were met with compassion or criticism, whether love felt predictable or unpredictable, whether connection felt safe or very conditional. And as children, our brains are constantly gathering this information. We're asking questions that we don't even realize we're asking. What does love look like? What happens when someone is angry? Is it safe to have needs? Can I depend on other people? And do I have to earn love? Will people stay? And do my feelings even matter? And those answers become what I call your love lessons. They're not just memories, they're expectations, they're belief systems, they're assumptions, and eventually they become your relationship blueprint. This is why two people can experience the exact same situation in adulthood, and they're going to interpret it completely differently. So one partner over here forgets to text, and one person over here thinks they're just probably busy. And the other immediately thinks they're pulling away, something's wrong. Same event, but a different blueprint for different people. It's a different love lesson because our reactions aren't only shaped by what is happening today. They are shaped by everything that our nervous system has learned about love years ago. So John Bowlby talks about in attachment research and taught us that our earliest caregiving relationships shape our expectations of connection. Mary Ainsworth expanded on this theory by demonstrating that consistency and responsiveness and emotional attunement and availability that we experience early in life absolutely influences how we approach all of our relationships later. More recently, Sue Johnson's work in EFT has actually shown us that our very deepest relationship conflicts are often protest against disconnection rather than evidence of incompatibility. So all this is going to point to the same truth. The way you learned love becomes the way your nervous system expects love. The good news is that awareness changes things. It changes everything. Because once you recognize your blueprint, you no longer have to be controlled by it. So as you're listening to this, if you're hearing this and you're wondering, what are my love lessons? Or what blueprint am I bringing into my relationships? I've created a free resource to help you start answering some of those questions. It's called the Pinkerton Relational Health Index, or the PRHI. And this is a quiz that helps you identify your relationship strengths, your attachment patterns, your emotional triggers, conflict cycles, communication styles, and the areas that may be quietly influencing the way you are connecting with the people that you love. Because you can't change a pattern that you don't even see. And awareness is always going to be the first step towards that transformation. So you can download the PRHI using the link below. Now, I want to take this one step deeper, and I want to look at how those love lessons become the expectations that you carry into every relationship. So something I find fascinating about the human brain is that it is constantly trying to create predictability. Your brain would rather experience something familiar, no matter how it feels, than something unknown. So even if what is familiar isn't actually healthy, that's because familiarity has often been associated with survival. This is why your love lessons become so powerful. They don't just shape what you believe about relationships or yourself. They shape what you expect from all relationships. So think about it this way. If you grew up in a home where love was warm and consistent and emotionally available and safe, then your nervous system probably learned to expect that closeness could be trusted. But if love ever felt unpredictable, if affection came and went, if it was sporadic, or if you had to earn approval, if there was chaos, if conflict felt explosive, if your emotions or needs were dismissed or minimized, or if you never quite knew which version of your parent you were going to get or what was going to walk in the door, then your nervous system learned something very different. It learned that love was uncertain. It learned that connection isn't safe. It learned that closeness could disappear, that relationships require you to stay alert and hypervigilant. Those expectations don't suddenly disappear because you become an adult. They quietly follow you into adulthood and into all your relationships. They're going to influence who you're attracted to. They influence how you interpret your partner's behavior. They influence what feels normal. And this is why I often tell people that your partner isn't always responding to what you did. They're responding to what your behavior means to their nervous system. So for example, imagine two people, they receive the same text message. I'll call you later. And one person barely thinks about it. Okay. The other person immediately thinks a lot about it. Are they upset with me? Did I do something wrong? Or are they going to call me back? Are they pulling away? The difference isn't intelligence. It isn't insecurity either, which we all think it is. It's the blueprint. The nervous system is filling in the blanks using old information. That's why I always encourage couples to become really curious instead of critical. Instead of asking, why are you reacting like this? Start asking, what does this situation mean to you? What is the story in your head? What story is your nervous system telling you? What is the fear underneath that reaction? And those questions completely change the conversation. Because when we understand the meaning underneath the behavior, we stop fighting the symptom, and then we can begin understanding the person. And this is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your partner, not immediately trying to fix them, not telling them they're overreacting or they're too sensitive, not convincing them they shouldn't feel that way, not defending, denying, explaining, or proving, but genuinely becoming curious about what their nervous system has learned about love. One of the things that we learned from EFT is that beneath almost every conflict is an attachment question. Do you see me? Do I matter to you? Will you be there for me? Can I count on you? And those questions aren't childish. They're actually human. And they began forming long before we ever enter our first romantic relationship. That's why I call them love lessons, because every experience taught you something. And maybe you learned that love means sacrifice. Maybe you learned that love means walking on eggshells. Maybe you learned that love always leaves. Or maybe you learned that love means staying quiet. Maybe that love means taking care of everybody else's needs first. Or maybe you learned that love means proving your worth, earning it. Or maybe you were fortunate enough to know that love actually means safety, that your voice matters, that your emotions matter, that repair is always possible, that conflict doesn't have to end in abandonment. Those lessons become the lens through which you experience every future relationship. And here's the beautiful part. Just because you learned those lessons first, it doesn't mean that they have to be the lessons that you're going to keep working from, because awareness always comes before change. So the moment you can recognize that the blueprint that you have, and you decide I'm going to stop living from it unconsciously, then that is where your healing begins. So one of the reasons these love lessons are so powerful is because they don't just become thoughts. They become your biology. And this is where neuroscience becomes so incredibly helpful here, because it explains something that people often misunderstand. So your nervous system is not responding to reality. It's all about survival. And it responds to what it predicts reality will be based on your past experiences. So I want you to really think about that for a second. Your brain's constantly asking one question. What happened the last time that I was in a situation like this? So if your early experiences taught you that conflict led to criticism or abandonment or silence or any sort of emotional pain, your nervous system is preparing you for that outcome long before it actually happens. And this is why someone can simply say, "Can we talk later?" And your body immediately becomes anxious and you are spiraling. Your heart rate is changing. You feel sick to your stomach. You feel tightened up and your thoughts are racing. And you haven't even had the conversation yet. But your nervous system already has. It's already decided because it's remembering. And I often explain to my clients that the nervous system has an incredible memory, not necessarily for events, but for emotional experiences. It remembers what rejection felt like so long ago. It remembers what unpredictability felt like. It remembers what walking on eggshells felt like. And it remembers what it felt like when no one came to comfort you. It remembers what it felt like to never know whether love would be available or withdrawn. And those experiences become stored as emotional expectations. And this is why I often hear people say things like, I don't know why I reacted that way. But the truth is, your reaction probably wasn't even about that moment alone. It was about this moment reminding your nervous system of yet another moment and another until your body responded as though it needed to protect you all over again. And this is one of the reasons emotionally healthy partners sometimes become confused. They'll say, but hold on, like that's not what I meant. I wasn't abandoning you. I wasn't rejecting you. I wasn't criticizing you. And they're telling you the truth. Intent does matter, but so does impact. And your partner may not be responding to your intention. They're responding to what your behavior meant to their nervous system. So that's why simply saying, you're overreacting almost never helps, because their body doesn't feel like it's overreacting. Their body feels like it is surviving. So one of the greatest shifts that I try to help couples make is moving from judgment to curiosity. Instead of asking, why are you making such a big deal out of this? Try asking, what did this bring up for you? What story is in your head? What were you afraid was going to happen next? Those questions help people move from protection into connection. So in Dan Siegel's work, he talks about the importance of integrating the thinking brain and the emotional brain. So when we're dysregulated, those parts of the brain, they become disconnected. And we lose access to perspective. We're looking through a different lens, and we lose access to empathy. We lose access to flexible thinking. But when we slow down enough and we become really curious about what is happening inside of us, those parts of the brain begin communicating again. And that's when we stop reacting automatically and we start responding intentionally. So one of my favorite things to tell clients is this: your nervous system is not your enemy. It's trying to protect you. The problem is that it's using an old map. It's responding to yesterday's experiences while you're trying to live today's life. So healing is helping your nervous system realize that today is not yesterday. We have a new map, and that this relationship is not your childhood. This conflict is not your parents' conflict. That this disappointment is not the same disappointment that you experienced 20 years ago. And that's why healing isn't simply learning new communication styles or skills, as people so often think that's what they need. Instead, healing is giving your nervous system new experiences that it slowly begins to update the blueprint, the map. Because the nervous system learns through experience, not just data, not just information. We are experiential, and we need to repeatedly experience safety where we once experienced danger. We need to have consistency where we once had unpredictability. We need to have repair where we once expected abandonment. And then we're going to have connection where we once thought we would just have distance. And that's how that blueprint will change. It's not overnight, but one safe relational experience at a time. So one of the reasons that these love lessons are so influential is that they don't just shape how you react. They shape what you expect to happen. So without realizing it, every one of us walks into an adult relationship carrying this invisible set of expectations about love, how it's supposed to feel like. And those expectations weren't created when you just started dating. They were created years earlier. And if love felt unpredictable, then you're going to unconsciously expect unpredictability. If your affection had to be earned, you're going to find yourself performing and trying to earn love instead of simply receiving it. And if conflict always ended in silence or criticism or emotional distance, then your nervous system may brace for that outcome before the conversation has even started. This is why relationships often become so confusing. So people tell me, I know my partner isn't my parent. I mean, I know this relationship is different, so I don't get it. And I see they're logically trying to reconcile that. But the thing is that the logical brain does understand that, but the nervous system is still responding to something different. It's responding to expectation. And one of the things I try to explain to couples is that expectations quietly shape our perception. We don't simply experience our relationships, we interpret them. So two people can experience the exact same interaction and walk away with completely different meanings and conclusions. So imagine if your partner comes home after a difficult day at work and they're quiet, they're distracted, they're just emotionally unavailable and spent for a little while. And someone whose early experiences taught them that people need space might think they've had a bad day. I'm going to give them just a little bit of time, to decompress. But somebody else may immediately think they're upset with me. I must have done something wrong. What is this about? That they're pulling away. Is this relationship in trouble? And the event didn't create that reaction, but the expectation did. And this is why I often say that relationships, they don't just activate our strengths. They expose every bit of our unfinished business, our unfinished work. And they reveal what our nervous system has learned to expect, which is one of the most freeing moments in therapy, is when someone realizes, I am not reacting to my partner anymore. I'm now realizing I'm reacting to what my partner's behavior means to me. And that is a completely different thing. Conversation changing. Because now we're no longer asking who's right. We're asking, where did this expectation come from? So one of my very favorite questions to ask to clients is, when you imagine love, what automatically comes to mind? So for some people, it's warmth or feeling safe. Other people, it's anxiety. Some people, it's peace. Some people, it's unpredictability. For some, it's acceptance. For others, it's performance, it's earning. And every answer tells me a story. And every story points back to a love lesson. And the beautiful thing about recognizing those expectations is that they stop operating unconsciously. You begin noticing them. You're going to begin questioning them. And you begin asking, is this actually true about my relationship today? Or is this something my nervous system learned a long time ago? And that question creates an enormous amount of freedom. Because once you become aware of your expectations, you can stop assuming their reality. You begin recognizing them as a blueprint. And blueprints can be redesigned. They are not your destiny. They are simply your starting point. And that's one of the most hopeful things that I get to witness in my work with people. People realizing they don't have to keep loving the way they were first taught. They can learn a healthier way to love. And that healthier way becomes the new blueprint. If everything we're talked about today feels a little discouraging, I want to leave you with what I believe is the most hopeful part of this entire conversation. Your love lessons are powerful, but they are not permanent. They may have become your first blueprint. They do not have to become your final blueprint. And one of the greatest gifts that our brains have is something called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity simply means that your brain has the beautiful ability to change throughout your life. It can form new pathways, it can develop new expectations, and it can create new experiences that eventually become the new normal. So that means your nervous system can learn that love doesn't have to feel chaotic to be exciting. It can learn that conflict doesn't automatically end in abandonment. It can learn that vulnerability doesn't always lead to rejection. And it can learn that your needs matter, that repair is possible. It can learn that two people can disagree and still stay emotionally connected. And that is what healing actually is. Healing is not pretending that your childhood didn't happen. Healing is not blaming your parents forever. Healing is not becoming a completely different person. Healing is giving your nervous system enough new experiences and new evidence that it slowly begins believing a different story. I tell clients that we don't heal by understanding our childhood intellectually. We heal by experiencing something different emotionally. So think about that. If your nervous system learned that love meant unpredictability, then healing comes through this experiencing consistency. If your nervous system learned that emotions were unsafe, then healing comes through repeatedly experiencing emotional safety. If your nervous system learned that asking for your needs to be met led to rejection, then healing comes through discovering that healthy people actually want to understand your needs and meet them. This is why healthy relationships can feel so uncomfortable at first. Not because they're unhealthy, but because they're actually unfamiliar. Your nervous system has spent so many years predicting one outcome. Now it's being introduced to something different. Sometimes people will even say, I don't know why this healthy relationship feels boring to me. And I always smile because that's not necessarily boredom. That's unfamiliarity. Your nervous system has spent years basically associating unpredictability with chemistry, intensity with passion, anxiety with attraction. And now here someone comes and they're consistent. They are emotionally available. They communicate well. They want to stay connected during conflict. They follow through. There's someone who make you feel safe. And instead of your nervous system saying, oh my God, this feels so amazing, it instead sometimes just says, this feels way too different. And different is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable before it begins to feel safe. That's why healing requires patience, because you're not just changing behaviors. You're literally teaching your brain and your body a new definition of love. You're teaching your nervous system that healthy love doesn't have to be earned. It doesn't have to be chased. It doesn't have to be confusing at all. It doesn't have to be emotionally exhausting. Healing love can actually feel peaceful, grounded, predictable, safe, consistent. And that may be one of the hardest love lessons that you'll ever learn. But it may also be one of the most life-changing. Because once your blueprint changes, your relationships begin changing too. Not because everybody around you suddenly becomes different, but because you do. You begin choosing differently. You are showing up differently. You're responding differently. You're communicating differently, and you're expecting differently. And ultimately, you're loving differently. Every relationship you've ever had has been influenced by the love lessons you've learned long before you ever fell in love. The question isn't whether you have a blueprint. You do. The question is whether you're living from it consciously or unconsciously. Because awareness changes everything. You cannot rewrite a blueprint you don't know exists. But the moment you recognize the story that your nervous system has been telling you your entire life about love, then you finally have the opportunity to write a new one. And that may be the most powerful relationship decision that you're ever going to make. So if you found this helpful, you're going to love my next video because we're going to make this incredibly personal. We're going to answer one question. What did I learn about love as a child that now makes these healthy relationships feel unfamiliar or boring? I'm going to continue on with that because once you understand the specific love lesson that your nervous system learned growing up, you will finally understand why you're drawn to certain people and why some relationships feel exciting while others don't, and why healthy love can sometimes feel surprisingly uncomfortable. More importantly, I'll show you what you can do about it. Because awareness is only just part of it. It's only the beginning. Transformation happens when you start living by new love lessons instead of old ones. So I'll see you in the next video.